Now we move to the Houston Texans. They finished 4-13. Main departure was they finally got a Deshaun Watson trade. Obviously, if you follow football, lost tackle Marcus Cannon, running back David Johnson, wide receiver Danny Amendola, cornerback Terrence Mitchell, and then they added guard AJ Cann, Steven Nelson, very good nickel cornerback, running back Marlon Mack, and then in the draft grabbed a cornerback Derek Stingley at number 3, drafted guard Kenyon Green at 15. And then grabbed your guy, Jalen Pitre. Drafted John Michie III, also in the second round. Unfortunately, he's going to be missing this year due to leukemia. So hopefully, he makes a recovery and gets back next year. And then in the third round, grabbed linebacker Christian Harris. And then finally, running back Dameon Pierce in the fourth round. Obviously, these teams had later picks, but we're not going that far. Nonetheless, though, John, I feel like we're going to have similar expectations of the Houston Texans. They did better than we all expected last year. They weren't even last in their division. I think we all had them at the bottom of the totem pole in terms of the entire NFL. Did a little better than expected. Davis Mills was solid. So what do you expect in the year one of the Lovie Smith, right? That's their head coach now, era.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the Texans are probably going to finish last in the division this year. I know they didn't last year, but I'm expecting the Jaguars to improve a little bit. And the Texans, I'm not sure how much they improve. I'm not sure if they get worse. So they won 4 games last year. Maybe they win 5 this year, but I think they're going to be about the same because I think there's just going to be a lot of young players starting. Everything I've heard out of camp from them so far, even in preseason, Dameon Pierce, he had a great first game in preseason. He averaged like 9 yards a carry, and it was limited. It was like 5 carries total, but it was still a lot of yards, so he could instantly come in and be an impact player right away. But I think, honestly, all those players that you listed that they drafted could be starting day one. I like what they did in the draft because I think they understood that they're a team that's really far away from being able to build into a legitimate playoff contender and championship team because unlike maybe even the Jaguars who are worse than them, they don't have a guy who they think could be their franchise quarterback. As of right now, Davis Mills actually had a really solid season last year. I think it could be argued that he was the second best rookie quarterback behind Mac Jones last season. So I think that he's a little bit underrated and he could have a pretty good year this year so far. Maybe he could be the franchise quarterback. We don't know. But I don't think they have as much confidence in some of their building blocks as some of these other teams might. So I think that their plan in the draft was we're going to go for the guys who might be viewed as risky but have the highest ceilings. And so that led to, like you mentioned, third pick, Derek Stingley. A lot of people didn't expect him to even go top 5. They thought he had the talent, but there was questions about the motivation and the decline in statistics over the last couple of years of his career at college and LSU. And so, but he has the highest ceiling of a lot of players in this draft, so they take him at number 3. Then Kenyon Green, an offensive lineman that people thought maybe late first, but he just has a lot of versatility. They take him in the top 15. Jalen Pitre, another guy, really high ceiling. John Mechie, really high ceiling. Christian Harris just played at Alabama, so he's a really well-known linebacker, and they produce a lot of solid.
Well, I think he was a high recruit too. I think he was like at 5. He's like so there could be untapped potential there.
So really talented linebacker, and also when you go to Alabama, you're always really fundamentally sound, especially on defense. So you get him, and then Dameon Pierce, I already mentioned, having a really good camp, and I think so. All of those guys could be starting right away. And that's why I think they could be a bad team. Not that those players are going to be bad, but there's just going to be a learning curve for a lot of them. Even with Davis Mills, still going to be a learning curve. Wouldn't be shocked if maybe we see Brandon Cooks get traded this year. It had sort of been mentioned last year that there might be some teams that were looking for a receiver. Your Green Bay Packers had been mentioned towards the trade deadline. And I wouldn't be shocked to see that because it seems like his timeline maybe doesn't really align with the team's timeline. There was even rumors of maybe a Laramie Tunsil trade. So I think the Texans, they're still going to be a bad team this year, but there is hope if you're a Texans fan because they loaded up on draft picks. They drafted a lot of talent. And so in a year with low expectations, you never know. You could have some guys who become breakout stars and you start to accelerate a little more quickly than you thought you would. And worst case scenario, you're a bad team. You got a high draft pick again next year. Maybe you get a C.J. Stroud or a Bryce Young to be that quarterback if Davis Mills doesn't work out. And if he does, there's some stud edge rushers like a Will Anderson that are coming out next year. So I like what the Texans did this offseason. I'm glad for them that they were able to finally get this Deshaun Watson thing off their backs, because it just felt like a shadow looming over the organization for quite some time. The only move that I'm not criticizing it, but questioning it, is why they fired. I'm blanking on their coach's name from last. Yeah, David Culley. Why they fired David Culley for Lovie Smith, and that's no shot at Lovie Smith. The guy's been around the league for a very long time, but I don't feel like there was any expectations for David Culley last year, so it seems like there was no reason to fire him because everybody knew the team was not going to be good. And I thought it was a questionable hiring in the first place, but I don't really understand why you'd hire a guy for a year. Your team performs basically as expected, arguably a little bit better than expected because they weren't the worst team in the NFL. And there was even some moments of hope, like we talked about Davis Mills, who performed better than expected, and then he gets fired. I don't really understand that. From what I heard, he got a pretty great severance package, so if they wanted him to just be a stand-in coach for a year, that's fine. But then Lovie Smith doesn't feel like this elite long-term option that has like a lot of hope for the future because he's been around the NFL for a very long time, and we've sort of seen him be a head coach in the past. So I don't know what their plan is for the head coaching position. It just doesn't really, I don't know. To me, it doesn't line up with a rebuild. So that's the only real questionable thing I have for the Texans this offseason. But other than that, I think their offseason was fine, and I like the fact that they went out and got high-ceiling players just to see what happens.
I'm right with you on both parts. I thought David Culley kind of, I don't want to say a bad phrase, but he got the short end of the stick, to say the least. Like you said, like he had 1 year. It was 1 year, his first year. This was a team that had Deshaun Watson, like you said, looming over them, and not much talent, to go around because they used all their first round picks to bring in Laramie Tunsil and Kenny Stills, which Kenny Stills' part didn't really work out. And then, so yeah, who knows what's going on in Texans front office? We know that. I mean, even when Deshaun Watson had requested a trade, I think we all kind of felt that there was something dysfunctional. I know that's a word that's thrown around a lot, but something of that sort going on with the front office. So we'll see. But we'll say, draft-wise, like you mentioned, I really like what they did. I know I wasn't high on Derek Stingley, but like you said, like we both said, like he had the talent. He had his ceiling was, if we were going off ceiling, he probably could have been the 1 or 2 in terms of the draft for me as well. But they were, like I said, like many others, I had concerns about his performance as the years went on because it declined, which really shouldn't go that way. But hey, he did have a foot injury that he had surgery for over the I think this past year over the off season. So maybe that's what affected him, and maybe he can bounce back. I personally hope so for him. I'm not rooting against him. But yeah, I'm with you. I think this is going to be a 5-12, 4-13 type team again. They are building the structure for a good team. Getting Kenyon Green, I like that because they already have 2 tackle positions solidified. So maybe even if they get rid of Brandon Cooks to have 2 first rounders, maybe they'll get a high 2nd or 3rd round pick for him, or another first. Who knows? If they get rid of him. If not, regardless if Davis Mills is the guy or not, like we mentioned, they have 2 first rounders. They could. Heck, with how bad they might be able to get a quarterback without having to sacrifice the other first rounder and move up. And then maybe, so maybe they get the Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud, and then with one of the other high picks, they grab a wide receiver, and all of a sudden, man, they got a pretty good offense there. And if Dameon Pierce works out, that's even better. Obviously, their defense is still kind of a work in progress. We'll have to see what impact Derek Stingley has his rookie year, and Jalen Pitre as well, if they can contribute right away. And I'd be very interested to see that because Lovie Smith is a defensive type guy. So we'll see if, obviously this team performed better than expected last year, especially on defense too. So it's one of those things we'll just have to wait and see. But I'm with you. Don't think they'll be making the playoffs this year, barring any sort of crazy internal growth that we don't know about. But nonetheless, it's going to be hopefully a good building year for them just to develop some guys like Derek Stingley, and maybe Davis Mills, if not, improve his stock and maybe trade him in the offseason if they want to get another quarterback. So they have that kind of flexibility. So we'll see what happens in Houston. I probably won't have my eye too close on them, but we'll check in on them periodically throughout the year.